Well, hi, Hamid. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming. Um, I ask a question to all my guests when we get started. It's a very rhetorical one, but I'll ask you anyway. And that is, are you spiritually active?
Oh, wow. I regret now not listening to your prior episodes so I could steal people's answers. I would say that I am spiritually active, and I think it's important also to understand what spiritual means and what spirit means because in my experience, I was never a spiritual person. I kind of was turned off by that terminology in my early life. And part of it is just growing up with like standard religious views. And I think that at some point I looked in Merriam-Webster dictionary and there are 16 definitions of the word spirit. Everything
Wow.
from, emotion to the human psyche to things like disembodied ghosts or spirits
Yep.
and malevolent entities and also alcoholic beverages are spirits. And so I find the word spiritual is a little vague sometimes. And so when I talk about my spirituality, I think it's more about my my relationship with myself and the universe tends to revolve more around my heart, my soul, what fills me up that way, versus a materially driven outlook. So to me, sound is spiritual too, because it activates these things. And all the practices of meditation are spiritual, and nature is spiritual.
Yep.
So that's sort of, yes, I'm spiritually active as long as we can agree what that means.
Beautiful. Yeah, lay down those definitions. I've been thinking a lot about, that definition myself and how, to your point, sometimes it's like the materialistic nature of things. It's chasing something that feels outside of yourself, but lately it's been just like living the human experience and enjoying that journey, and kind of all the fun little things that come with it. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of your favorite modalities to connect with yourself? You mentioned sound, which of course we'll get into today in depth, but tell us more.
Well, as I get older and older, I realize that I don't engage so much anymore in formal practices. About 15 years ago, if you would have asked me this, I was a daily meditator. I'd meditate very frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I would I would do all kinds of journaling practices. I would do some karmic practices of service, yoga every day. And what I realize now is that it's all just been incorporated into how I arrive in the world. So everything to me is kind of part of my practice, and I have very few formal practices. So, for example, I live way out. You've been at my house. It's way out
Mm-hmm.
here in nature. So every day I'm out there first thing in the morning with my dog, my bare feet on the ground, looking at the sunrise and
Mm.
just kind of taking care of myself and keeping my mornings simple and my routine simple. And, you know, for me, the more I can connect with nature, the more I feel at home in this universe. The more
Amen.
I'm like cooped up inside or in a city for a long time, the more I start to forget who I am and gravitate more towards the distractive practices. Like, how
Sure.
can I distract myself?
Yeah.
So, nothing too formal these days. I do play music a lot. I sing a lot at home. I sing to my dog. I sing to myself. I play guitar, and I'm learning the didgeridoo. Been learning it for a while, but every day playing a little bit of didgeridoo seems to
Love
be
that.
kind of a nice meditation and breathwork practice for me. And then just connecting with people, talking to those people that are close to me is one of my biggest loves. I love human connection.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's so funny how, lately I've been noticing how early the sun rises and sets because it's it makes me feel silly how like just stepping outside in the sunlight first thing in the morning and like taking in a few moments to yourself is like that's all you need sometimes. It feels so good. And to your point, you're out in nature, you're surrounded by it, which is amazing.
Yeah, this time of year especially, it's
Gorgeous.
abundant. All the flowers are out, the birds are out. It's like paradise, and it's not too hot.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know you pretty well. We got to spend a lot of time together recently as I went through your sound meditation training. But for our listeners, tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Oh my God. If I'm to recount my whole life story, we'll spend the next hour and a half. So
Yeah.
I I like to say, I think in short, that I'm kind of interested in everything and I'm curious about everything, which has been the guiding principle in my life, which if you look on paper and I tried to create a timeline, it would make almost no sense to anybody but me. I went to music school because I was so passionate about music and it was a big part of my life, and I got a music degree, and then I went to law school, which was totally like a left turn, but it started to get my brain thinking in a totally different way and exercise this part of my brain that's really analytical and likes to solve problems. And then it's just been a constant evolution, going from being a lawyer in LA to moving to Arizona and transitioning into teaching yoga and bringing sound back into my life more as part of what I do, which is, bringing sound first as a yoga teacher, then bringing sound into meditation and helping people in group settings, private settings, and then really diving into all kinds of weird side projects, trips, spending a lot of time in Asia studying Thai massage and spending time down in South America studying some of the indigenous traditions that work with master plants like ayahuasca, wachuma, and then here in Arizona, having access to some of the beautiful traditions that are native here and working with some of the local indigenous people. And these days, I don't know what I do. I do offer the sound training, which you came to, which is like a
Yes.
passion. I love helping people connect with that aspect of themselves. I do a lot of work now one-on-one online with people across the world, doing health coaching and working with their minerals and their psyche and their emotions in a very strange but beautiful way. And then I do plant medicine work and take people on retreats and help people connect with that world. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Whenever I tell people about your sound certification, I always joke, I'm like, you will be singing, so just prepare yourself, because I'm sure you remember how terrified I was. But it was such a great space to do it in with all the people that we had together. So,
Yeah, there's certain moments that I have to put people in a little bit of discomfort, but
of
within the
course.
the container of a safe environment where we're okay, being vulnerable, and it's okay to sound weird, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to cry if that happens.
Yeah.
It's part of it, and I yeah, that's the one thing that people always say is like, I've heard that I have to sing.
I will say, like, it was such a heart opener for me, though, because now, I mean, as vulnerable as it is to do that with yourself, right? Like, let alone with a small group of people who you've just met and are starting to trust, like, it opens up something in you, if that's not normally like your thing, right? Or even just making sound, if you're a quieter individual, or playing an instrument and not being good at something the first time. It's a very, very vulnerable but exciting, expansive space to be in, for sure.
Yeah. And not just, doing this for fun and because I enjoy watching people squirm, but what I've seen is that in myself, the more that I got into allowing my voice to free itself It has allowed me to speak my truth in my life and to live truer to who I am, because there's a huge interplay between whether we're able to just open our mouth and express a sound, which is very close to an emotion, very close to our soul. It's a very spiritual thing in front of other people, because we wear so many masks. I remember when I was an attorney, I was wearing the mask of the attorney during the day. Then I'd get off work and I'd have a different personality.
Totally.
With everybody. And there was a time where I was transitioning from being an attorney into a yoga teacher. And it's like the two worlds. I had two different, two different masks, two different projections happening. It gets very confusing for ourselves to know who we are. And the thing that has helped me align everything is my voice, and being able to speak from my heart, being able to sing when necessary, or when I feel like I want to sing in front of other people, has really just opened up that ability to take off all of these conceptions, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So this is the big question, right? That I don't know if a lot of people ask themselves, but we certainly did during our time together. What is sound?
Oh, so
we'll be here for 6 hours.
That's funny, because I think that's how I start, day one, which is asking you all. I'm like, you all signed up for a sound training that's going to take 2 weekends. What is sound? And then everybody looks at me like, wait.
Shoot.
Well, to me, sound is a very complex thing, and that's why I asked the question. Because there's the materialistic kind of reductionist view of sound, which is that it is a physical vibration within the space that we live. So maybe the vibration of the air moving from an instrument, or from my lips and my vocal cords creating this vibration that is then sent out and vibrates physically some part of, some other being. And there is the whole physical aspect of sound, which is really complex. And, we got into it with Pythagoras and the harmonic series. And the only people that understand that are people that have gone through my training now, and physicists, because nobody else knows about the harmonic series. But there's another aspect of sound, and I think that's why I asked that question during the training a lot, which is there's the experience of sound that we have, which is unique to each person. We don't actually know how each individual is experiencing something. And because that experience is created by our mind, at least that's the modern view of things, we really are each having a very unique type of experience each time there's a sound. The examples that are really easy for people to connect with, not everybody has had this experience, but a lot of people have taken plants, like something as simple as cannabis, for instance, which is very widespread. And then they listen to music and they're like, oh my God, the sound is so different. Well, I can guarantee you the sound externally in the physical world didn't change. It's exactly the same, but all of a sudden your perception of it has changed. That shows us that, what we're perceiving all the time in terms of sound is really a product of our minds and a product of our experience, and we don't really know how to listen well. You might see this now because you've been through the training. You start to listen in a different way, and you start to hear things differently. And for me, when I listen to music, it's a totally different experience now than in the past. I loved it in the past too, but I hear different things. So sound is spiritual. It's happening within our psyche, within our emotions. It's one of the few little physical phenomenon that can instantly change your emotions too. I mean, you hear certain songs and instantly you're, oh my God, I'm feeling something swell up. How is that?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And to me, sound is just this magic. Of course, it's innate, to humanity. It's one of the things that humans have is this language that we talk to each other. So, the fact that we have spoken language tells us that sound is really important to us. It's really important for our relations with each other, and versus like dogs have sound too, but they don't speak to us in this, They're a
Wow.
little bit more tuned in with their noses, I think.
Yeah.
And we don't have that.
Yeah.
But we're more tuned in, I think, with the sounds. Yeah.
Different kind of connection for sure. I don't know if you remember when you asked during that kind of that lecture, that very beginning part of our weekend together, when you were like, if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? And I
Yeah.
was like, yes, because if I were the tree, I would want to be heard.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's like, well, can the tree hear? Will we ever know that? I'm not sure.
Well, this is very interesting. I was talking to a good friend of mine who's a recording studio engineer yesterday about this. Because when he leaves his house, he blasts his music as loud as the speakers will tolerate. And he has all these plants inside. And he thinks that it's helping the plants grow. And then he told me that there's this vineyard in France that has these huge speakers that
Very cool.
plays for the grapes. And he said, but it has to be really loud. And I joked and I said, well, obviously it has to be loud because they don't have ears. So
Yeah.
they don't,
They have to physically feel the vibration or
they have
that
to
energy.
physically feel it. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different way of perceiving it than us,
Right.
but there's a lot of, I don't know that you would put it in the category of peer-reviewed science, but there's a lot of people that have researched, speaking to plants and telling them you love them and how beautiful they are, and then also playing music for them, and it does seem to have an effect on their growth.
Yeah.
So I would say plants are experiencing sound, but not in the way that we're experiencing it.
Yeah.
And so the physical vibration is there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
The tree heard it. It heard
Yeah.
its own fall. That's the next question.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You
guess.
got to add that into your agenda.
Right.
I've also seen this is kind of a trend on social media where people will speak into their water, affirmations or whatever, they're trying to embody. And then when they drink that water, the belief that those molecules are somehow shifted, changed, affected by those affirmations to then go within, which I think is
Yeah.
great. Woo woo, but for sure great.
Yeah. It's fairly out there, but there's a book called The Hidden Messages in Water by this doctor in Japan named Dr. Emoto. And you can see, physical effects based on what they said to the water. Water is very interesting because water does appear to have the ability to hold memory in a certain way, kind of like that,
Yes.
or to take different shapes. We think of it as just like, oh, it's liquid or it's solid, but actually the molecules can kind of arrange themselves in various ways. So
Yeah.
just because we don't understand how it works, I don't think it means that it doesn't work,
Yeah, it's a deep appreciation of the intelligence of things other than what we deem intelligent, like with that word,
Yeah, I mean, this starts to really, I know you like this, but when you start to think about water and hydrogen and oxygen attracting to each other, there's a magnetic attraction there. But see, even the modern conception of electrons, this has never been proven. It's a model that works in theory, but we don't really understand, this energy that's driving hydrogen and oxygen to just love each other and
Yep.
to form that. And then oxygen is very interesting because it likes to react with things. So it has a magnetic attraction to all kinds of things.
Yeah.
When you start to get on this scale, you see that the materialistic world that we think exists actually dissolves at small levels.
Yes.
Because even the models of atoms, if we could prove them, they don't make a lot of sense. There's not a physical atom per se. It's just energy. And that
Right.
starts to show us that what we perceive, yeah, maybe we're all spiritually active. We just don't realize it.
Sure. Or we define it in different ways, and that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. You started to mention a few kind of perceptions around sound specifically, but can you share maybe some common misconceptions about what sound is meditation, healing. I know we talked and had a debate about like, what do you even call a sound meditation class? So I'd love
Okay.
to hear your perspective on what people think it is and what it might really be.
Well, yeah, again, people need to come to my 2 weekend course because these are very interesting and lengthy topics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are happening. One of the ways that I would just approach this question is to say that, when people don't have a lot of knowledge about something, and this doesn't just apply to sound or music, when you don't have a lot of knowledge, it's easy to just find stuff and be like, that's it, that's it.
Yep.
But you got to go deeper. You got to ask questions. You've got to be curious. And what's happened, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years, this is my perception, is that this practice of sound meditation, using instruments to take people into transcendental states, has entered the mainstream.
Yep.
And a lot of the people that are purveying the information were new to it. They didn't have a lot of background knowledge. And so it's not nefarious. They just spread a lot of nonsense that is sort of the dogma, because somebody said it once, then it's true, and they don't
Yep.
go deeper. And the sound world is not immune from that kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, we see that in
But
a lot of wellness practices, right? Yoga is a perfect example of cue something this way, don't cue it that way. Here's why, because I said so is usually the
right,
reason. Right.
yes, yeah, there's a lot of that where people don't ask a lot of questions. I think in sound, most people these days that are exposed to it might have heard the term sound healing,
Yeah.
which is, again, like the word spiritual, the term healing has a lot of different meanings. So I tend not to use the term sound healing for the work I do because it's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
People might be wondering, like, well, what does that mean? Am I broken? Do I need to be healed
Yeah.
to go to this class? Can I just go for fun, or do I have to heal? Like,
Yeah.
what is healing? Is the sound doing the healing? Is this some sort of medical type procedure, or is he doing the healing? Is Hamid going to be healing me, or does he think he's some kind of shaman or guru? Like, I don't want to go to that either. So I kind of shy away from the term sound healing because to me it's a little vague, which is why you've already used the term, but I use the term sound meditation
Yeah.
because I think it's fairer, it's more descriptive. It's not as whoa, so sexy sounding, but it sounds a little dry maybe to people when they hear sound meditation. But the practice is the same, whether it's called sound meditation, sound healing, sound bath, I've heard,
Yep.
gong baths. Those are, I've actually had people tell me that, I've asked the question, like, have you ever been to a sound uh, meditation? They said, well, I was going to go to this sound bath, it was at this resort, but I didn't have my bathing suit. And I was like, well, see, there's an example that people are really confused as to what that means. So I try to keep it simple. But using instruments like this to take people into transcendental states of meditation is all over. I think every town now in America is going to have some kind of sound healing, sound meditation practice.
Sure.
There's a lot of other strange beliefs that come out in the sound world. A lot of it comes from the mixing of Eastern systems like yoga, where people have a limited knowledge of the chakra system, and
Mm-hmm.
they are believing that there's certain notes that they have to use to work with certain chakra. This is one of the common beliefs that's preyed
Yep.
upon largely by people trying to make money. I don't think this one is innocent. I think this one is actually an example of malinformation where
Mm-hmm.
it was designed to deceive people, but a lot of people still believe, you need an F note, for example, to open the heart. And the example I say is, well, if the F bowl really opened the heart, then we just need one F bowl, in the entire city of Phoenix. We'd have a line on Sundays. People would line up.
Yep.
They'd walk up. I'd play the F bowl in front of their heart. Ding! Their hearts are open. Hallelujah! And next in line, please. And you wouldn't need to have everybody doing this all over the place.
Yeah.
That's just an example of oversimplification of something that's very complicated. Because to understand the chakra system, and to understand the many levels of who we are, we're not just physical beings, we're spiritual, we have emotions, and what's causing the blockages in the heart. An F note is not the cure. It's not going to hurt, but it isn't the answer. And, there's other weird things like that out there. I don't want to go into all of them unless you really want to, but
No, you're good. That's a great one. Because I fell subject to that. I shared, I owned 2 crystal bowls prior to going through, the training that you hosted. And I felt like a silly girl because I was like, oh my gosh, this is a marketing scheme for sure. And what I will say is I learned, and I'm still learning, as both a practitioner as well as someone who now promotes themselves playing sounds. It's all about that moment, right? Of how the sound is received then and there. It could be that you're experiencing a blockage in your heart chakra and it's ready to be opened up and moved around. It might be the next day you practice the exact same practice and it turns out your root chakra was where you needed some attention, or maybe it's a very physical experience or a more ethereal one in your mind. So I've really just been telling people, like, it truly is not about what is coming out. It's about how you're receiving it and where you're at in that moment in time.
Yes. This falls into the category of a paradigm problem. So because of the Western view of how medicine works, I think this comes from the Western medical model, which is that there's a specific condition. Let's call that condition blocked heart.
Yeah.
But it's taking the Western paradigm like, oh, I have type 2 diabetes, but in this case,
Sure.
I have blocked heart. And there's a medication, a specific medication for that condition. And so it's very easy to convince Westerners of things like this, where it's like, oh, blocked heart, here's the medication, it's an F note. And because we have been programmed to think that way, then we fall into that. There's other examples of the exact same thing. One is the solfeggio frequencies I see is like really popular because it's the same idea, which is like, oh, I need the frequency of love. So 528 hertz, that must be it because that's the medication for this condition that I have.
Yes.
And when you dig deep into the solfeggio frequencies, you also find out, well, there was not a lot there. There's not really any evidence that this is true, but
Right.
It does sell a lot of views, at least on YouTube videos or Spotify streams, and then people are getting very defensive about it. I had a class. I was teaching at a yoga teacher training recently, and somebody pulled up, they said, this is a peer-reviewed study from PubMed about how 528 cured testicular cancer or something like this. So I said, well, they said, what do you think about that? I said, well, I don't know that I have read it, but I have a feeling it's probably not done in a scientific way because you would need to test probably every other frequency.
Correct.
And in the same conditions to actually isolate this. So you're not able to say that this is the frequency. And then I think I said, but I tried to hold back, but just the fact that they were researching 528 is a problem for me because it means they bought into this solfeggio thing without actually looking at where it came from.
Sure.
And so I find that science, quote unquote, sometimes is a little iffy too when you get into the sound world because everyone's trying to prove something and you can pretty much put a study together to prove whatever you want.
Yep.
That's not limited to sound. That's also limited to anybody who wants to do a study.
Right. So. It could have been the results of that are just the benefit from receiving frequencies in general, right? Like, where's the Where, where's the
Well,
control group?
yeah, see the upside of all this, and that's what I tried to convey to all of you, is that it actually is a freeing of your mind, because if you
Mm,
can understand that any sound is good, all the frequencies are good, then you don't need to get stuck into, I need this particular frequency. You can say, I can use any frequency. And
sure.
that to me is even more powerful. Would you
Yeah.
want to be the sound healer, the sound practitioner who only had these, oh, I've only got an F, so that's only for your heart. I've only got one 528, so that's only for this. And then it's like you've got three tools at your disposal. Or would you like to be the sound practitioner that can take people to wherever they need with whatever you've got? And to
Mm,
me, that's the way that I practice, which is, the sky's the limit. All the frequencies are good. Let's use them
yeah.
all.
I love that. If you don't mind, let's go down that rabbit hole just a little bit. We talked about, what is happening during a sound healing. Am I healing myself? Are you, as the practitioner, doing the healing? And there is some scientific proof, some studies out there that do demonstrate that sound is indeed a healer. So, can you talk about maybe a study or something that's, interesting to you that you've seen, like, okay, this is when I got bought in. This works, and what that healing actually means.
Well, I will give a disclaimer, which is that I stay away from the studies, and I have read a
That's
lot.
true.
Um, well,
I
one
read them,
study
but I
that,
stay away.
yeah, one study that I found interesting, and I can't give you a citation to it, but it had to do with targeting certain frequencies at cancer cells.
Mm,
And it wasn't just one frequency, so you can't do this by just sending like one sine wave. What they figured out is that you have to send two notes at the same time to create a harmony. And the
mm,
ratio of the harmony that seemed to do the best at disintegrating cancer cells was the minor sixth. For those people that don't understand music, there's a minor sixth is just the relationship between two different notes, and we call it the minor sixth for simplicity.
mm.
But what's even more fascinating is, if you remember, I drew this big chart on day one about the
I
harmonic
remember.
series and phi, and how the golden ratio is represented in the dimension of time. We think of geometry as, Pythagoras triangles, we can see it. But geometry is happening in the dimension of time. We can't see it, but we hear it as
Yes.
sound. And that ratio, excuse me, that ratio that starts to form in the harmonic series is the minor sixth. And it just keeps spiraling in this minor sixth spiral, which is phi, or phi, 1.618 to the infinity. And it never gets to anywhere. It keeps spiraling in on itself. It's an
Mm.
infinite spiral. So I did find it interesting that that study at least found that that ratio, that golden ratio, explodes cancer cells. The thing that people, not everyone, don't just run to your piano now and start playing minor sixth for your 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 family members who are dealing with cancer, because what they were doing was using ultrasound. And
Mm.
ultrasound is in a non-audible range. We can't hear it. So we can only hear up to about 20,000 hertz or vibrations per second. So they were using frequencies in the hundreds of thousands of hertz. So, it does work. I mean, sound can go audible and inaudible.
Yep.
That study I find interesting. To me, my experiences with sound are just being in my body, being in my,
Mm.
that's why I kind of don't need studies. It's
Yeah.
like there's no study for my life. It doesn't need to be justified. I've had such profound emotional releases, such profound
Mm.
insights just by working with sound and myself, that to me, that's the study. And the study is one that's been carried on through human history, through every culture.
Yeah.
Every culture utilizes music, dance, and I mean, we don't even need PubMed, but I know these days people are really interested in the studies, so there are there, but The psyche, I think, the way that sound does healing for me, this is the way that I understand it, is that it changes my consciousness.
Yes.
And it gets us out of these states of mind, and it gets our nervous system into a state of healing. When our nervous system is activated in a sympathetic nervous system response, we're not going to be healing. We're going to be kind of adapting to our environment to try to stay alive. This is like survival mode.
Right.
I didn't realize that I pretty much lived my whole life in that mode until I got into yoga
Yeah.
and meditation. And when I did, and I started to experiment with, okay, I can do these deeper practices where I slip into these parasympathetic states. You know, as a yoga teacher, you probably see, people, they don't like shavasana. Some people,
Nope.
they're out. Why? Because that's really hard. That's actually where the healing is going to occur, the parasympathetic nervous system. And it doesn't feel right when you're not used to it.
Yeah.
So I was I was opposite, like I would go to yoga just for shavasana. And for people that don't practice yoga, shavasana is the part at the end where you finally lay down and you don't do anything. And they usually play some nice music and you just slip into this state between waking and sleeping. And it's amazing. And I started that way, realizing that Shavasana is where all the healing occurred. If I didn't get a good Shavasana, I would feel like the yoga practice was not complete. Until I shifted, as you know, now basically the entire practice is Shavasana that I give. I just skip the exercise part and I say, let's lay down and let's use this instruments and let's do a 45-minute Shavasana. And it takes the nervous system into a parasympathetic state. This activates all of the self-healing properties within the body. It also allows the mind to slow down enough that deeper parts of ourselves are revealed into our awareness. So for me, that's where the magic of sound meditation happens. For me, is in my psyche, which is happening everywhere within the body. There's a cascade. I'm not sure if the sound itself is doing it on the physical level. I want to believe that the sound is vibrating my cells too, and it's
Yeah.
creating that coherent water that we talk about, and it's doing all these things. That's the part that I'm a little unsure about. I really don't know if that is happening or it's just changing my consciousness and my whole nervous system, and I'm doing the healing. My current opinion, if you had to ask me to take sides, is I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's a little of both because I have some evidence to suggest that even not hearing the sound is healing. And that's because I've worked with people who are deaf and who came to my sound meditations a lot to listen or to feel the vibrations of these
Yeah, that's
instruments.
beautiful. Yeah.
And their experience, again, this is not a controlled study, was that it was incredibly helpful for their emotions, for their psyche, for everything, but they couldn't hear it.
Right.
So I think there is something happening physically we don't fully understand.
Yeah. And I love the idea of how sure you are of being unsure. As someone who's gone like deep into the craft of music, of learning instruments, of just understanding this concept of sound, I think it's to your point earlier, very freeing to know that we can complicate this as much as we want. And you know me, like I love to ask these big esoteric questions, but it also is very liberating to be able to sit there and simply say, just by you experiencing something different and allowing yourself, like giving yourself full permission to experience that is a healing experience all on its own. You know,
Yeah.
some people can't lay there for, to your point, 2 minutes, let alone an hour.
Right.
Or some sounds don't resonate with people. And that's okay too, right? Like there's no good sound.
Right.
As you've said, there's just sounds. And so I think that's really beautiful that like we're never going to know the answer and that's okay. It's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. And the other way that I would maybe put that is we're sometimes scared to believe in our own experience. We need some validation for it. And I'm a big fan of like letting go of that and really tapping into that is spiritual. When your experience is what matters to you, I think that's where you've kind of let go of so much of the programming.
Yeah. Gorgeous. So you play a lot of different instruments. You mentioned earlier you're starting the didgeridoo. Tell us what some of your favorite instruments to play or just general sounds to make or hear are. Like, what are you really resonating with right now?
Well,
No pun intended, resonating.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I just finished a 1 month harmonium. I'd say course, but it happens frequently. It's just every week we learn a new harmonium chant. And to me, my harmonium, for people that don't know what a harmonium is, imagine it looks like a little piano, but it's kind of a cross between a piano and accordion because you pump it. And well, that didn't really help for you, but you know,
Yeah.
it's an instrument you sing along to. And for me, when I'm at home, I'm really a lot of times playing my harmonium and singing. And when I say singing, I don't imagine, you know, pop music. I just make sounds. Sometimes it is a mantra, sometimes it's a song, but a lot of times it's just exploring my voice in like a free way. I I was originally a guitar player. I got my first guitar at age 4. I didn't really play it until 12 or 13. I got an electric guitar, and that piqued my interest more. So I still gravitate to my guitar. That's my go-to instrument when I just want to sit down and noodle around and play. And I think the reason is guitar for me, because I grew up with it. It is a part of me. I don't have to think about it. It's like we're speaking English right now. We're not thinking about it. I can speak guitar. So I just pick it up, and it's like, I want this feeling. I know how to do it. I want to express this way. I know how to do it. When when people really dive into an instrument, you know, and develop that type of relationship with it, then you reach a different level of expression where the instrument is just an extension of you. So you can convey how you're feeling, for instance, just by playing. And so I'll often just sit and play guitar. That's kind of my go-to. But yes, I know how to play many, many instruments. A lot of them I only play for other people these days. Gong is one of them. I don't typically play at home. My dog is very scared of the gong, so that's not that soothing for me to play if he's here. Uh, Singing bowls, I tend to play for other people. The flutes, I love playing flute, but flute to me, I love playing in nature. So when I go hiking, I'll take a flute. And I
Yeah.
love the sound of the flute through canyons or just out there. It's almost like talking to the wind and the birds to me.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And drums, I love everything.
You
But
love
my
it
two
all.
main are the harmonium and the guitar.
I love it. I remember meeting Brooke for the first time, and understanding like our voice is an instrument in and of itself. And we've referred to this, you know, even the fact that we have spoken languages and a great diversity of those just proves the intention and the meaning of sound, and how essential it is to the human experience. But I remember her sharing her story, or maybe you shared this, of her throat singing into water, out in nature, and just noticing how, you know, a human's sounds interact with the environment around us, and what that feels like for you as the maker of that sound. And I will never forget that. I actually got emotional at that part of our training, because I was like, first of all, how did you make that noise? You know, it sounds so just primal, like so natural. And then you're teaching us how to make these noises. It's just so cool. There are so many
Yeah.
undiscovered sounds, I think, that we could experience, and we just don't know about them yet. And that's crazy in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah, Brooke is a good friend of mine who came to the sound training and taught about overtone singing. But as you discovered, overtone singing is so much more than what people think. And a lot of the cultures that developed it were trying to imitate the sounds of nature, like the babbling brook sounds, like the water moving over the rocks, and the sounds of the goats, the sounds of the cows, and it
Yeah.
really, I think the fact that those practices exist and they're just free, like anybody can do them, it shows how far away we are from our connection with nature these days.
Yeah.
Like you think about the environment that most people live, you've got background noise, but it's cars driving by, it's horns honking, it's airplanes overhead. We're not going to try to imitate those sounds with our voice. But if you were living out in, around waterfalls and birds, you might actually sit there and try to talk to them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just, just shows a little bit about what we're losing by becoming city dwellers.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
it's funny. Someone told me the other day. So I don't know if you have Spotify or what you usually
I
listen
do.
to. Okay, yeah. My day list changes, and usually at night I'll put on some sort of meditative music, and that's what I fall asleep to. Like sound is really comforting to me to get comfortable and like in my physical body and turn off my very overthinking brain. But some of the sounds, or one of my day lists was called like birds chirping in the rainforest or something like that. And I shared it on social media, and someone said, bird sounds specifically are so comforting to humans because subconsciously birds only chirp or make certain sounds when it's safe to do so. And so by them making their noise, we immediately or automatically feel and intuitively know that we are also safe. And I thought that was such like I don't even know how that's proven.
Oh yeah,
But I'm just
that's
like,
amazing.
that is some pretty cool shit right there.
This is how anyone can prove it to themselves, which is you go sit around with
Yes.
birds chirping and you just notice how good you feel. And
Yep.
then notice if it gets quiet. When it gets quiet, you don't usually notice right away, but your nervous systems, your heart speeds up, your blood pressure increases. And that
Hmm.
quiet, the birds stop singing for a reason because there's a predator there. And so this is like
Yeah.
hardwired into us.
Yes.
There are people that have done studies on this. I don't know if I mentioned it in our sound training, but I often talk about elevator music
Mm.
and how, in New York City, I lived there for a time and had to ride elevators a lot. And, because of New York culture where people don't talk to each other and you don't make eye contact with each other, being in an elevator with 10 strangers, climbing 40, 50 floors, it's one of the most stressful innate experiences people have every day
Yeah.
because it's quiet. So there was a company called Muzak, and what they did was start playing music inside the elevators. And they did studies that showed people were happier, their blood pressure was better, all kinds of things. And it's like, well, that's that. See, we're just tapping into that innate part of ourselves that really hates silence.
Yeah.
And the silence is very uncomfortable. So, that's where we get Kenny G and all that smooth
Yeah.
jazz. But
I've
yeah.
also seen, things about, and this is more so multiple senses, right? Your sight, the sound, but even in city centers where they place a park or more plants and green and have nature, have birds, even play fake sounds in a
Yep.
city center. It does a lot for crime rates and the well-being of people. So there's
Yeah.
definitely something to all of this, which is just so cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're living in modern times, but our biology is very old.
Yeah.
Some of these are just innate.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I have a couple rapid fire questions as we wrap up our little chat here. Um, you mentioned we are spiritual beings, but we're humans, right? So I'd love for you to share what is your favorite part about the human experience?
Well, maybe maybe hard because I have this aversion to favorites, but I'll try. Because people ask me, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite this? I'm like, I don't have
I
a
don't want to pick
favorite.
one. Okay, what
I don't
is
want to
one of
pick one.
the coolest parts of the human experience to you?
I think that we're very unique creatures. Just everybody that has a dog or a pet in their life can really relate to this, which is that we do make decisions. We're fundamentally driven by our intuition, or what other people might refer to as our instinct. We know the right answers, but we're also blessed or cursed with this thing called a brain that likes to analyze and provide reasons for everything. So we're kind of weird because we know the answer inherently, but then we get into fights with ourselves about, oh, is that right? Or is this justified? Or what are the reasons, And, for instance, it starts to like show us parts of ourselves to be human. Whereas like with my dog, he doesn't really ever question himself. He just does it. And I think he's freer. So, well, this sounds like I'm saying something bad, but actually it's good, which is I think we came here to have that experience of discovering who we are and to really have the confusion, because there's some beauty in that. There's some part of us that really wants that. Because if it was just so easy, we would have just come in as a dog. That's my feeling.
I
Like we
love
wanted
that.
to have the challenge.
Absolutely.
And
I
I like the mind. I'm curious. I like that aspect, which is just like trying to figure out how we work, how we tick.
Yeah. I said the other day, if I didn't reincarnate as a dog, I would be either a manatee or a whale. Because
Yeah.
they float along, they live their very free lives for the most part, and I think it's just so beautiful. To your point,
Yes,
liberation.
and very smart too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different types of intelligence. Our
Yes.
intelligence is very weird.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
weird is a good word. Cool. Why do you think spiritual connection is important?
I think it's important because if we're experiencing life in a very materialistic way, just this is what it is, this is how everything is, then we've lost some connection. And the connection starts to dissipate. We start to feel separate from the universe. And the moment we feel that we're separate from other people, separate from this cosmos, I think is when we're in pain and we're in suffering. And what I've realized is like anytime that I'm in this like state of mind or emotions where I'm feeling really weird, if I ask the question, I'm usually feeling very separate at that moment. Like my problems are unique to myself, and and I'm not connected to this bigger universe
Oneness.
experience oneness.
Yeah.
And the moment that I can tap in and feel that, it's like, oh, what am I worried about? I mean, none of us are going to make it out alive. And it really can help put things back into perspective for
Yeah.
me. So I don't want to say that that's true for everybody, but for me, it's that oneness, it's the connection that I think the mind, like I said, it likes to take us away from that. It likes to
Sure.
take us into other directions, and we have to keep coming back and remembering.
Yeah. We're big fans of the ego here on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. What's a book or resource that you would recommend for our listeners to learn more, whether it's about sound, meditation, anything that we've talked about today?
Wow. There's so many. I think that the book that I keep coming back to for people that I think is a really good introduction for sound or exploring what it means to use your voice is a book by Girish, which is Girish is how you spell his name, and it's called Music and Mantras for Health and Happiness or something like that. I mean, music and mantras is the first part. And what I find is like every time I connect with that book, it's just so simple. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, why am I trying to do so many different modalities, so many different things to feel a certain way? And then he'll get you to just hum or, sit there and chant a very simple mantra and you'll feel amazing. And I like the simplicity of it.
Beautiful. I love that. It's in my cart. I remember you suggesting that book for sure.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Awesome. Tell us about where we can find you or any cool things that you're doing upcoming that you'd like to share. I know you have a retreat coming up, maybe another sound meditation training? Question mark. Tell us.
Yeah, well, I have a bunch of things in the works. I have a retreat. This is the second annual retreat to Peru coming up in July. I would love to have people come if they're interested in exploring a very deep practice. This is working with a very beautiful plant called wachuma, which in a very traditional way, a safe way. We're going to go with my teacher, Miguel. Yeah, I'm happy to give people information so they can reach out for that. I do one-to-one work. Most of that's accessible through my website, Mineral Shaman, which we didn't talk at all about, but health coaching and stuff is at the Mineral Shaman website. I'm also at Mineral Shaman on Instagram. And then, see, I told you I have too many things. Then, then yes, I have the sound trainings, but the next one will be in the fall. I have always running every day, 365 days a year, an online sound training that's accessible at my other website, which is just my name, hamidjabbar.com. And people can reach out for that or any other questions. I'm always happy to respond to people. I have some music coming out soon. It's very different.
Yay!
It's music. It's music for people to use in deep meditation. They are in the form of a prayer, although they're not religious prayers. I'm trying to get people to understand the power of prayer outside of religion, because prayer to me is one of the most powerful things we can do, which is just taking ourselves into these deep states of gratitude and humbleness. And so there will be 4 prayers released. They kind of follow the medicine wheel, which is how we do the ceremonies in South America, to the different directions. And each one is a different intention, like gratitude, clarity, unity, and love. And it's accompanied by really beautiful meditation music that me and my friend created. It's also really useful for people that are doing psychedelic assisted therapies or plant medicine work on their own, to have something that's intentionally created for that, to help keep them within, a good place. So that will be released soon through all of the major avenues.
Awesome. Yeah, and you have a ton of music out on those avenues as well already. So if
Yes.
listeners want to hear some of your stuff, it's out there too.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you for being on the show, Hamid. It was great to catch up with you. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Caitlin. My pleasure.
Well, we'll have to have you back when we talk about minerals. We'll go deep on that because
Okay,
I don't know much about it. So, would love to do that with you.
Anytime.
Cool. Beautiful. All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.